Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile, the podcast celebrating cinema one film at a time. Each week, my co-host Jake, Bill, and I break down a film, discussing anything from mise-en-scène to scenes you missed. Today, we talk about how we can get home for Thanksgiving in 1987's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Jake, this was your pick this week, and it was a very logical pick.
I know. I saw I had the pick before Thanksgiving, and I said there's one movie and one movie only that we can watch. Mainly because this is the only movie I knew that was about Thanksgiving. So I was like, well, it's the obvious choice. This is a movie I had seen, easily like probably 10 years ago, maybe like 8 years ago, somewhere in there. And I didn't finish it because I didn't enjoy it. But I was
Really?
like, I've grown up now. Steve Martin, I think, is hilarious. John
That's because you love
Candy,
Only Murders in the Building.
well, among other things, yes. John Candy, I think, is hilarious. I like John Hughes, and so I'm like, there's no way I can't like this. So I was like, you know what? We're just gonna tell the whole world out there. I'm gonna watch it, and I'm gonna tell the whole world my feelings. And I enjoyed it this time. It was funny. I don't know if it's more relatable now that
Oh, it's
like
1,000,000,000% more relatable.
the fact that this will be my third year in a row working on Thanksgiving. So there's like the adulthood factor is so much more relatable, I think. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
but no, this is funny. It's a John Hughes movie that's not a teen comedy, which part of the reason he wanted to make this was to prove that like he doesn't just do teen movies, because prior to this, it is these are his director credits. Now John Hughes is also a screenwriter and has written much more than he's directed.
Right.
But you have 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, three very, very notable 80s teen comedies. And so he wanted to make this movie to be like, I can make comedies for adults too. And he pulls it off.
Oh, he 1,000,000,000% pulls it off. I loved this movie. I don't think I'd seen it. Or maybe I'd seen part of it, but I hadn't seen the whole thing. It might have been a thing like you. And actually, just to even start off, it's really interesting that you mentioned that the first time you watched it, you were kind of like, I don't know if I like it, and kind of turned it off, but then you kind of gave it another shot. And I think that's really important when we talk about film and we talk about art in general, that one bad day could mean you have one opinion of a film, and another day means you have a very high opinion of a film. I mean, let's look back to the summer, right? With Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I called you and I was like, look, this movie's hot garbage.
Yes, you
And
did.
then
And I
we went and
was
saw it, and I was like,
floored.
this movie's incredible. It's
and
incredible.
then and then you went on a whole tirade about why haven't they released it on 4K and Blu-ray.
And then the day
Um,
we drop it is when they announced that December 6th. Yes, because December 1st is when they're going to drop it on Disney Plus. Um, but just a chef's kiss. I love that movie so much, and the score for that movie is so good. Anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about 1987. When you look at this film, it is unapologetically funny, and what I mean by that is that it like is no holds barred, and it kind of knows that it's funny, and so it kind of leans into it a little bit.
mhm.
We have very archetypal characters, but at the same time, these archetypal characters are just so relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're absolutely right. I'm working a double Thanksgiving, but it's like what is that? Occam's razor, what can go wrong will go wrong.
Uh, no, that's Murphy's Law.
Yeah. Occam
What
Murphy.
is Occam Razor? Is that some like Harry Potter
That's another
spell?
thing like a Murphy's Law. And if you notice on screen, we have the definition of Occam's razor. Um,
You nerd.
so yes, I know I'm a nerd. I know I'm a nerd. Um, but Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a classic Murphy's Law. and they play it up for laughs. And like I snorted. I snorted. I didn't like
Oh,
snort cocaine. That's not what I'm saying. I like snorted laughing because
the authorities can stand down. Ben is not a drug
yeah.
addict.
But I will say the one scene, kind of getting into John Candy, the one scene where he clears his throat, it was worse than that. It was
Yes.
way worse than that. It was, I can't even like think about it again. It was like I almost threw up. I was like, that is so disgusting. But it was so funny, but it was so disgusting.
Yeah. It is. This is really a movie of. You're right. They're two very archetypal characters. Neal and Del. Neal being played by Steve Martin and Del by John Candy. They're very archetypal, kind of yin and yang, in that they're very much polar opposites. I mean, Neal is very much the hardened business type is kind of a pessimist about everything and wants to be left alone, and kind of looks for the negative in everything. And Dell is kind of very happy-go-lucky, looks for the fun and the cheer and everything, and looks on the bright side, thinks everything, finds the joke in everything. So it's there are hundreds of movies and stories that riff on this concept, but the fact of these two are stuck together because they can't get home for Thanksgiving is like somehow all the more relatable, like being stuck next. It all starts about, when you think about it, having someone steal your cab. Now, I've never lived in a place that has cabs.
Having Kevin Bacon
Yes.
steal your cab.
Uh, and then buying a cab off some guy and then having that cab stolen. And you rushing to make your flight.
He
I've
said, if you
never.
can pay 50, you can pay 75.
What an asshole! What a literal asshole! I mean, where is the holiday spirit in that, sir?
Hit on Wall Street.
No, no. But the fact, like, I don't know, I feel like this just starts off so like relatable in the fact, like, then they're stuck next to each other in the plane, and no one likes sitting next to an annoying person on the plane, be that if you're a talkative person, you probably don't enjoy sitting next to the silent type on the plane, and if you're the silent type, you don't enjoy sitting next to the talkative person. And just no one in general likes the middle seat. And also, sidetrack here for a little bit. Let's talk about some airplane etiquette, folks. This is not your home. The socks and shoes stay on. The socks and shoes stay on your feet because your feet smell. I know this. You know this. America knows this. I don't need to smell them. I already am like claustrophobic and hate being on this plane anyways. Don't make me smell your feet. The socks and shoes stay on. Full stop. End of story. Anything else you should be banned from air travel for life.
What people don't understand is that the air inside the cabin is recycled.
Yeah.
But it's not defunct.
Exactly.
You
It's
don't
like the same.
they can't defunk the air.
It's the same as farting. Like,
Yeah.
if you fart on a plane, like, heaven forbid it's a cross country or international flight, because that fart's just circling around for 3, 5, 18 hours for all we know.
Yeah, you know why they call it a red eye? Because you get pink eye if you fart in a plane.
I don't think that's how that works at all. But okay. You really liked that joke.
Yeah, I was really proud of that. I was really proud. But yes, so it's interesting you mentioned that, because we have all of these events that kind of take place that are unrealistic. all of these are unrealistic, and certainly the string together is unrealistic. But talking about comedies in general, they're so situational.
Mhm.
You could take two actors that are very, very funny and say, this is what's going to happen, and they can make something out of it. But when you especially lean into these archetypes, I mean, why are we sitting here talking about how funny this movie is from 1987 when we've seen a million movies like it?
Exactly.
I think that's the question. And I think the answer in part has to do with if a movie makes you laugh, it's done its job.
Mhm.
And there is a comfort I think that you almost need to have with the film, with the events, with the characters that then allows you to laugh.
Yeah.
And I think especially when you use those archetypes, that really comes into focus.
Mhm.
You're able to laugh because you're familiar with this kind of character. Because we all know Adele,
Mhm.
right? We all
Yes.
know the happy-go-lucky guy. We all know a Neal.
Mhm.
Some of us are Neals,
Some of us
but
are Dells.
some of us are Dells. Yeah, they're talk about Wisconsin. I mean, you know how many Dells they got?
I hear
But
there's a farmer in there somewhere.
wow, that unlocked a core memory. Farmer in the Dell. But it's so interesting when we talk about these archetypes, the pessimist, the optimist, and you put those together. And even though we've seen this a million times, we're talking about how funny, absolutely funny this movie is, and a little disgusting with the feet in the plane and the trying to hawk a loogie,
Yeah.
you know, um, or waking up and finding your hand is not between two pillows, you know, that. But when we
Could you
talk about these,
imagine?
I mean, I can imagine.
I don't want to.
I don't. Okay, so I don't really understand how two people can sleep in the same bed. Like, I understand logically that that is something that can happen, but I mean, when you have like a living furnace right next to you, why would you ever want to lay down next to it? You know, I like to run cold. You have to drop your body temperature in order to sleep.
Yeah.
But then if you're like two people in a bed and you're like kind of like tossing and turning,
Mhm.
right? That would wake you up. But to have John Candy to to still be able to be asleep and have a bear of a human over you, you know, hands in between the pillows. I don't understand how he's able to
They
stay asleep. But that's kind of the point,
yeah.
right? These things that can't happen in real life don't ever happen in real life. If you put two funny people in there,
Mhm.
and you have those archetypes going, it it just works.
Yeah.
It just works, and
Yeah.
you can kind of it's the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah. I think also something I think that plays into this movie, especially putting it into the context of this is a movie about getting home for the holidays. We all know I love the holidays as much as the next person. I love Thanksgiving. I a fanatic for Christmas. Um and as much as, I love all those holidays, things can be stressful and spending time, the hustle and bustle of it all. And sometimes you're spending time with extended family that maybe you're not so much a fan of. Um, not saying that to any of my family who happen to watch this. I love you all. But people, the holidays stress people out for different reasons. And I think there's a comfort factor to this movie when you watch it in the holiday season of the kind of idea that misery loves company. And
Mm-hmm.
also you can laugh at someone else's misery and make yourself feel a little better about like, okay, yeah, like I have to work Thanksgiving, but at least I didn't spend the last 3 days like traversing from New York to Wichita to Wisconsin to try and get home to Chicago with this wackadoodle dude next to me and losing my wallet and all this stuff. Um, there's a German word, Schadenfreude. It's to take enjoyment or humor out of someone else's misery. And this, I
That
think,
word itself just took enjoyment and humor out of my my vibe. Um,
But
you
I
know,
think there's a fair amount of that to this movie for the audience of, because it's not you going through this, it's funny. If it was you, you'd hate it, but because it's not you, it's funny. And also, I think, I'm not, just to kind of to wrap up this point, I think that this is definitely a movie that doesn't try to overthink think itself, right? You point out these are two very archetypal characters, and it very much leans into that and says, you know what, this is funny. We're going to put these two characters into situations where we can play up their differences in this archetype and in this kind of trope. And that's going to be the movie. That's going to be the shtick of the movie. And it doesn't try to take itself too seriously and be like, oh, like we need to like reinvent the wheel. No, they made a really funny movie by just saying, hey, let's make a funny movie, you know?
mhm. Yeah, that so many times nowadays that because it's been said, and I know I've said it on this podcast before that everything is a remix.
Mm-hmm.
But so many times you just have these weird comedies that are niche, really niche. I'm even thinking of there are a lot of comedies that have come out in the last couple of years with comedians themselves playing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're trying to the point of the movie, I guess it is to tell a story, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
know how I'm the stickler for the story, but the point of the movie is to laugh. You go into it wanting to laugh, and so I think that's why they've tried to reinvent the comedy movie a little bit and kind of add it as like a stand-up. It's like almost like a Seinfeld.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just something about this just existing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
For
sure.
sure. Yeah, I agree. I think it's just it knows it's funny and it plays up its own jokes, and you take it or you leave it.
Yes. Now, I will say there are some logic issues.
Okay.
And I know we just said that we can kind of forgo those. But I have driven 13 hours straight from Indianapolis to Fargo, North Dakota. And in doing so, I drove through a significant portion of Illinois. The time does not make any sense in like the last half of this movie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like I literally Googled it. I was like, okay, how many miles from St. Louis to Chicago? And I think it's almost like almost 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at it. I was like, are you telling me like these must have had to have been like power naps?
Yeah.
Like, because you see Steve Martin's asleep and then John Candy's, and there's no way. There's no way. That, and so that like low key took me out of the movie just a little bit because I was like, there's no way that it has taken this much time to
Mm-hmm.
get from St. Louis to Chicago. So that's the only logic problem I really have in the whole thing. I also this is very much of a time period.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And so I'm like racking my brain now, thinking, okay, how can we remake this? Because they've talked about remaking this film.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how can we modernize it? Right. So obviously the phone has got to go. Right.
Yeah.
That's got to be the first thing. But eh, this is a movie that can be remade, I
Oh
think.
yeah, for sure. I think it'd be a little different in the way that just like, so this is a pre-internet movie, and I think the internet just has changed so many factors of our lives that even the aspect of, the time that when he gets to the one motel and he tries to call his wife, and they have the lock on the phone so he can't dial, like
That was wild.
that that doesn't happen today because everyone has a cell phone. And you're in all these places that have public outlets, so you can't be like, oh well, the phone dies. Like, no, everyone that's traveling carries a phone charger with them. And yeah, so I think there would be a fair bit of difference there. And also, I think we just look at air travel differently in a post 9/11 world than we do in a pre 9/11 world. Like, when does that man actually show up at the airport at the beginning of the movie? He's like, it's within like under 30 minutes to his flight, I want to say. And I'm like, there is no way in hell like anyone would even try and risk that today. Like, you're insane if you do. I don't care if you're TSA pre-check. Like, it takes you 30 minutes to like run from concourse to concourse in some airports. So
yeah, I mean, they're trams like Dallas Fort Worth. You have to get on a freaking train.
Yeah. Atlanta is huge. Chicago O'Hare is huge. I don't know what NYC airport they fly out of, but I'm sure it's hefty.
It's hefty.
Yeah. But it's
hefty,
like
hefty.
You know what I mean? Like, from that, like when he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make the 6:00," and I'm like, "Wait, what time is he leaving?" Because like in my mind, like if my flight departs at 6, I need to be at the airport at 4.
If that's how you do it.
If it's like if it's right before Thanksgiving, I'm getting there at 3, because the extra congestion I just read, where this Thanksgiving travel season is supposed to be like the busiest ever. Like, we're finally supposed to like the travel season's finally getting back.
Going to be the boat
to the
busiest
boat
of all time.
Oh my god. Oh jeez.
You're like, good God.
But you know what I mean? Like, there's no way in a post 9/11 world, with security being what it is, that you could be. That would all have to change, and also I feel like they wouldn't take off if they knew they couldn't land. Like, does that happen?
Yes.
That's wild.
Yes, but you.
I feel like we're so much better at predicting weather that, like, if you could prevent that, you know, because now you just end up with all these people that are going to Chicago that are stranded in Kansas, which is 3 states away. Because that makes sense. And it's actually funny. John Hughes was inspired, I read, to write this movie because he was flying home to Chicago from New York and got stranded in Wichita. Like, that really happened to John Hughes, and he's like, "There's a movie here."
Oh, there's a 1,000,000,000% a movie. There's a whole reality there. I mean, and it's interesting because you're right. Like, the logic problem there of but we all set it aside. Which I think is just so incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, what other film has so many logic problems? Or you kind of have to put yourself in the mind of somebody in 1987, but like with all these logic problems, and you're still like, yeah, that makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a feeling. It's like a comedy movie is a feeling. It's like, this is how I feel, and it's playing out. It's also like commercials. Families in commercials are not realistic.
No,
they're not. But yet we're always like, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is because comedy movies or archetypal characters are the feeling we have when it comes to a certain issue or a certain situation. And so these characters are the feelings that we have, and so we can look past logic problems like that, and just because we just want to spend time with Dell, who was so out of pocket when he sold those shower rings as earrings. That was so funny. That was beyond funny.
It's so dumb. Like, who in their right mind would be like, this guy's onto something here? Like, I'm sorry, just from his mustache alone, like, I'm not trusting anything he's selling me, actually, is what he says it is.
And then when he whips off his watch and it's a Casio, and he goes, I lost it. I was like, this is so funny. But it always seems to. It's amazing that this movie hasn't been remade already, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But just what a spicy movie.
Yes.
It is. Yeah, this is like the Seinfeld of of Thanksgiving travel.
Yes, it
Yes.
is. If you could drop like 18 F-bombs in Seinfeld at the ticket
Yes, and
line.
you were telling me that that was kept in on purpose.
Yeah, I heard, or I've read stories where they were like, it's going to be an R-rated movie because of all the F-bombs in that one scene. And I mean, you cut out that scene, this is a PG movie.
Mhm.
And there's all kinds of marketing, not even marketing, but just like market research behind like the fact that you can take your kids to see it, or even just like having like that PG rating or a PG-13 rating rather than R, like you can make so much more money. So there was talk of, can we tone this down? And John Hughes was like adamantly like, no, and Steve Martin as well, because I don't think Steve Martin read a full script. I don't think before he read it, he just read a couple scenes, and that was one of them. And he was like, I like this. This is I want to do this. Um,
That's like when Liam Neeson agreed to be Qui-Gon
yeah,
on the phone call. They're like,
yeah,
you want to be in a Star Wars movie? He's like, yes. Like
yes.
they're like, I will sign whatever deal you want me to sign. Yeah, and he didn't
Um,
even read the script, partially because
and
George hadn't finished it yet.
well, yeah. Um, and most of Star Wars is in George's head, anyways.
That is
Um,
true.
but no, and I mean, Edie McClurg, who is a frequent makes a frequent appearance in a John Hughes movie. She's probably best known as the school secretary in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Um, when she says, "Well, you're effed," I lose it. I lose it because like, yes, his tirade is funny, but the fact that like she throws it back in his face, "Well, you're effed,"
Yeah, and
is all the
I
funnier.
guess it's also funny because I can't see myself ever getting that like
I would feel so bad
wild.
afterwards.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like I feel like I would have to take a step back, and I think I'd be frustrated because I couldn't take a step back because everybody's at the airport. But
Yeah.
I can't see myself
I
just
would send her
dropping.
flowers for like the rest of my life. I would feel so bad.
Yeah, yeah. And but or maybe send her some meals because apparently she can't cook. Um, but like you're having a whole conversation on that's again, that's like it's like this weird like we've been there before,
Yeah.
but that's never happened.
Yeah.
That's literally never happened to either of us, but we're both like, ah, yep.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
It's there's just
How are you
something
doing this?
so that's so familiar about it. And like going back to the whole archetype kind of deal, I think there's a familiarity in, seeing a character that we feel like we've seen before. It feels familiar. It feels like we're part of Neal's family or Dell's family almost, because like they're they're that unoriginal in a way, but like in the best way possible. It's like I've known you.
Sure. And I
Like from
think,
the opening scene, I feel like I know, I can tell you who Neal is and what he's going to do.
yeah, but at the same time, you can't pinpoint a person in your life that is
Yeah,
exactly like Neal.
yeah.
And I actually think that's something that John Hughes does really, really well in all of
Mhm.
his films. And I think that's why his legacy of especially teen comedy
Yeah.
is so strong, is because you have these characters that do not exist.
Mhm.
You have like the like Breakfast Club, right? You got the jock, you got the nerd, you got a, but in high school, a straight jock, well, that's actually not true. I knew a
I
few jocks in high school.
they exist in parts,
In
but
parts,
real people are more well-rounded and more fleshed out than these archetypes make them to be. But this isn't that kind of movie, so we don't get into that, right? We don't get into um because there's so much backstory to Dell's character in this movie especially, and we really don't get into any of that, because that would kind of take away, I think, from the humor of this. And they
that's
obviously
interesting.
were like, no, this is a comedy. And also Neal's our main character, and Dell's kind of like Dell, I wouldn't say call Dell a supporting character. He's like in the middle. You know, sometimes you have this movie that's like you're more important than a supporting character, but you're not the main character. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Dell is very much that. And there's so much to his story that we don't get into. And honestly, we don't want to just talk about like what I wanted from like a whole like well-rounded movie, and to make this like a better movie. I think I wanted more of Dell's story. I felt like we were cheated a lot of that, and there was a lot of potential there. But at the same time, that's not that's getting away from the archetype. You know,
That's fascinating.
we're
Yeah.
getting into the nitty gritty. The we're polishing and rounding out this character, and that's something we've just not done in this movie. That's not the attitude this movie seems to take. So while I think it would have made a better all around movie to get into the nitty gritty of our characters and flesh them out as real characters, this very clearly says, no, we're going to stick to the archetypes because it's more relatable and it's funnier.
Yeah, 100%. When you murky those waters, it's a lot less fun
Yeah.
to go swimming. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like in the Caribbean, right? They got really clear because I've definitely been there. But they have
Mr.
like really
Fail.
crystal blue water, right? But then you go up to Lake Webster in northern Indiana, and you're like, it is dark and brown, not brown, and that's weird. But you know
I
the
know.
color. You know the
I've pulled
color.
catfish out of that lake, so I
Have
that's
you
all
been
you
to
need to
that
know.
lake?
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
Wawasee, and they all connect up there.
that is true. Those two actually don't connect, but it's a whole thing.
Oh,
Anyway,
never mind.
um, but my point is, that when you murky those waters, when you add more layers to a character, they become inherently less funny. So I think that's why a lot of times we have comedies that are like really basic characters, but this is such a great example of why that's important. And so I'm really glad that we're talking about it because yes, we've seen movies, we've seen comedies, romantic comedies, but it's like when you have these bare bones, it's almost like you've got the character itself as a suit and you're able to like put yourself into the suit,
Yeah.
right? But the more you deepen the character, the tighter the suit becomes until you can't put it on anymore.
Yeah.
So it is my understanding, Jake, that this movie at an hour and a half was not originally how it was going to look.
No.
Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct from what I could find. The original cut was double the length at 3 hours long. And then
I
they
want to see
edited
that
it
so bad.
because I mean,
I want
really,
to see
all it
that so
was
bad.
is from what I understand is it's just more jokes. I think like
That's
there's not like more story. Like it was just more jokes from my
of
impression.
course. That sounds incredible.
But so they originally had this 3 hour cut, and then the John Hughes and the editor went down and cut it down to 2 hours. And that is the 2 hour cut is what test screened for test audiences. And they got reactions and stuff, and the studio wanted them to cut it down to an hour and a half. And so the hour and a half cut is what was released. Now you said you did a little digging and you found that on one of the physical media releases, there's extra footage.
Yes. So the 4K release of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles has, I think, like 75 minutes of extra footage.
Dang.
Um, so they're like extended scenes, deleted scenes. There's a whole scene with John Candy eating a hot dog and smoking at the same time, which is just
The most
such an
Chicago thing ever.
yeah, that is very Chicago. Um, and so my understanding is uh that that there is this extra footage. So I'm going to have to stop by my local Target and swipe that. I mean, I was literally talking on the phone to you a couple days ago, and I said that there was a 4K thing, and I said I almost bought it, and now I'm like, well, I have to go back and buy it because I need to see these extra scenes.
I mean, at 75 minutes, that's It's an hour and 15 minutes. That would be pretty much the 3 hour cut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
So,
if
and
my
don't
Ball
hold me to
State
75
math is
minutes. I could be
mathing.
wrong. I
Listen,
haven't taken a math class since high school.
I took one math class in college, and we talked about probability of cards and dice. And I'm like, all
Sounds
right,
incredible.
this is yeah.
Welcome to Gambling 100. Um,
Honestly,
that would be a class, man.
my dad and his casino buddies could teach that class better. All right, kids, this is how you play craps. That's the class I would go to.
Oh, for sure. Now is the time where we are going to go into Rosebud and Thorn. Jake, as always, I'm passing it off to you. What are your Rosebud and Thorn for planes, trains, and automobiles?
So got a couple roses, a couple buds, no thorns. This is a thornless flower today. Excuse me. I'm going to give roses to the obvious Steve Martin and John Candy. This movie, there's just so many moments when it's just them two, and like that's why this movie succeeds. Like if either of them or both of them sucked or were just even mediocre, this we wouldn't talk about this movie. But
Oh, for sure.
they were both top of their game here, and they understand their they understand their characters and what the story expects of them and how to play off each other and how they interact. And it's so good. So I'm going to give roses to both of them. Buds, I'm going to say score. I like the soundtrack on this, but like the score is this weird like intersection of rock, like
there's a lot of synth.
punk. Yeah, it's like rock meets rap or hip hop. And
Yeah.
I wasn't it wasn't a vibe. It really just it wasn't it. So but I mean, like I said, like the soundtrack, like the songs in this, like Tanner can tell you after I finished watching this, like the rest of the night, every time you go away.
Oh,
I
yeah.
sang that the rest of the night.
And Tanner
like,
goes, go away.
He said, go to sleep. I had to go to work the next day. But yeah, so I'm gonna say score. And then all right. I know I just went in a whole long defense about why this movie doesn't get into more story because that's not what it's expecting and it's funnier. But I still wanted more story.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dell could have been like such a well fleshed out character in if you wanted to make this more of a dramedy. And honestly, circling kind of back to talking about a remake, I feel like if this is remade, it's going to be as a more of a dramedy almost. Like still comedy focused, but lean more into the backstory here. And I think give Dell some scenes on his own where we, the audience is maybe clued in a little sooner that
his wife
has passed. Because like I think like the end is very touching.
It is a little jarring though.
Yeah, I feel it takes us emotionally a place like we haven't gone the whole film. Like
the emotional whiplash.
The last 15 minutes like have an incredible amount of heart that we have just neglected for the previous hour and 15 minutes. So I think you want to just talk about making this a better movie overall. I think the ceiling increases exponentially if you allow you flesh out the story more and allow some serious and tragic moments into it. So I'm going to give the story a bud because I wanted more there. And like I said, no thorns.
For me, I'm gonna say basically the same thing that you have said. Steve Martin and John Candy get roses from me. They're both spectacular in this, very very funny, really on the top of their game. I think John Hughes' writing is especially good in this. It is very very funny. Lots of great situational humor. So those are all my roses. Buds, the score did bother me. It did take me out, and it's because it's different than a like a Beverly Hills Cop. Like it's kind of got that same kind of vibe, but that doesn't necessarily make sense in this context. The
Right.
songs are great, but
Yeah.
the score itself is a little weird. It's like a different vibe, and I'm not really sure of that. And the other bud, I guess, is I want to see an extended edition. And once you, well, here's the thing. Once you said that there was at least a 2 hour cut that was shown to test audiences, I can see gaps.
Hmm.
Like thinking back on the film, I can see gaps where I would have liked to see a little bit more, and I think there was more that they just removed for time. But it's a clean edit.
Hmm. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
very tight. It's a tight story.
yeah. So and no thorns for me. Now we're going to talk about who we think we are, and I feel like we may both think we're the same person. But Jake, I'm going to pass
Really.
it off to you. Um,
Um, so I struggled with this because I think you're a fair bit of Dell and Neal both.
yeah,
I see you in both of them. But I'm gonna say you're Neal for the sole reason that
I got that, Riz.
no, this would happen to you.
Yes,
Like
would have.
this has never like fully happened to anyone besides John Hughes ever. And like John Hughes didn't even like experience the full experience that this movie is. But you could call me after like a holiday that you had to travel for, or just any travel experience at all. You could call me and you'd be like, you're not gonna believe the week I've had. And like somehow like this you it would happen to you. I can't explain it any other way.
I have the weirdest luck of all time. This actually something kind of like this did happen to me. In 2019, I went and visited some family out in Phoenix, and I wanted to spend an extra day with because there was like a connecting flight to LA and then from LA home. And so I wanted to spend an extra day with my buddy, who at the time lived in LA. So I bought just a one-way ticket a day earlier. And so I was like, okay, I will go a day earlier to LA and then I'll just catch the second leg of the flight. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So I do that, and I'm in Anastasia, the Broadway musical. It was opening night at the Pantages. And he had worked at the Pantages, so we got like super, super cheap tickets. And I remember getting the notification on my Apple Watch that, my first leg of the flight is about to depart. I was like, well, I'm already here, so it doesn't really matter. And so the next day, I get to the airport to catch the second leg. They said, you're not on this flight. So, well, what do you mean I'm not on this flight? I booked this flight. And they said, what happens when you don't show up for your first leg is that you forfeit the second leg. I was like,
Dang.
I'm sorry. And so I said, well, can I just have it back? Like we're about to go. And she like popped it up. She goes, it's gonna be $600
uh,
because
oof,
it's so last minute. And I didn't know what to do.
oof.
I didn't know what to do. So I had to use my credit card to to get this flight. And I was so upset. I was so upset. Um, but I did get on the plane, did get home. But for a minute there, I felt trapped, like
Yeah.
I couldn't go. So it's something similar, I guess, has happened to me. But long story long, you're obviously Dell, and I'm not just saying that because you love the Chicago Bears.
Dot
Um,
Bears suck.
you really do, but you just have this like caring quality that John Candy's very good at portraying in films, and so I don't know. And of course, if this were to ever happen to me, I'd want you alongside for the ride. Now, you wouldn't smoke and throw it and it bounce back in and then catch the car on fire. That was so wild.
And I won't put my
Um,
hands between the pillows.
you We're having separate beds. We're having separate beds.
I'll sleep on the floor at that if it comes to
You remember in high school where you would go like on a school trip or something, and it'd be like, okay, so 4 guys to a room.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
4 guys to a room. Yeah,
Yeah.
2 to a bed. This isn't a family member of mine. He's not an attractive female. It is just, I guess, a buddy. And so like we used to go to like church retreats, and so we would take all the pillows and like put them right in the middle.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because I just like to not want to touch another man's, like warm furnace body as I'm trying to sleep. So anyway, but yes, you're Dell. But as we move into final thoughts, Jake, I'm going to pass it off to you as I do every single week. What are your final thoughts on planes, trains, and automobiles?
Final thoughts. I'm glad. I'm really glad I gave this a second watch, because I don't know if it's just I'm more of an adult now, what have you, but I understood this movie. I appreciated it a little more. It's hilarious, and yeah, don't think too hard about it. It's funny. It's enjoyable. I hope this never happens to any one of you out there, that you go through this grueling experience. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, and this film, I agree. It was such a pleasant watch. It was so funny. I like genuinely laughed out loud, and I think it was because, one, I've kind of been there, as we now have learned, but two, just as an adult, life is just harder in a lot of ways, and so you just kind of vibe with these characters. But these archetypes, I think it's been a very fascinating discussion, and so next time you folks at home watch it, see those archetypes for what they are, almost like a suit that you can kind of get into, the rose-colored glasses you can put on and feel like you are that character, because they're vague in the right way, and so you can really relate to them. But yeah, very, very funny movie. And yes, happy Thanksgiving to all of you folks out there. This is coming, what? Thanksgiving is how many hours? A few.
Under 24 hours to Thanksgiving.
Under 24 hours. So
hope
make sure
your
to
turkey
loosen
is
your belts.
defrosting.
Yes, that is the hope. But the real question is for you folks at home. Have you seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? I know people haven't, which is just wild to me. Let us know your thoughts, your Rosebud and Thorn, and your final thoughts, whatever you want to talk about in the comments down below. If you like this video, hit that like button and ring that bell with the subscribe button to get all notifications on upcoming content. We still got plenty more for you through the end of the year. If you want to follow us on social media, you see the socials right there. For Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week. And cut.